So Nintendo has a very difficult decision on their hands when it comes to how they follow up the most successful console generation that they have ever found themselves in with the Nintendo Switch generation. And yes, while it's not quite the king of the most units they've ever sold, it will no doubt accomplish that in this life cycle. And when you stop and look at the software attached, just how many pieces of software have been sold on the Nintendo Switch, I think it's fairly safe to say that this is the most successful we've ever seen Nintendo be in a single console generation. And one thing, if you look at Nintendo's history, when they have a huge smash hit success of home hardware, they have a hard time following it up with a back-to-back successful generation. And one key thing that will definitely help propel Switch 2 on the right track or wrong track is what kind of launch lineup they will build out for their software. Because while the new, exciting, more powerful hardware will definitely drive consumers in to go pick up this console, the hardware alone is not what makes you spend $400 on a brand new gaming machine, but rather the experiences you can have in games with that new said console. And how Nintendo starts off this generation, I believe, will be crucial. And I think that's where that difficult decision comes into play, which is which franchise and entry in that franchise do they lead off with as a big reason to go rush into a store and buy a brand new Nintendo Switch 2. So in today's video, I want to unpack a few different games that I think are highly likely to be out at launch or shortly thereafter, and have that conversation on what the biggest draw might be from a software perspective for the launch window of Nintendo Switch 2. So we'll get on the same page with all of that. Before we do, make sure you like, subscribe, and turn on your bell notification to join Sunbro Nation if you're new here. And the first and probably most likely game we will see Nintendo launch their next gen hardware with is none other than a brand new 3D Mario adventure. Now, it has been since October of 2017 since we have seen Super Mario Odyssey launch on the Nintendo Switch that we know and love today, and clearly it is a monster success 3D Mario game at over 27 million units sold. But when you stop and look at a calendar, you realize that October 2017 has essentially almost been a full 7 years behind us, and we don't have the new announcement for what the next 3D Mario will be. So this is a prime candidate, and as I mentioned, the most likely game that Nintendo will lead off with for their next gen hardware. There's some credible names suggesting that this is the plan for Nintendo as well. And even if you count Bowser's Fury as a spin-off game, that's still been 3.5 years, and it was really a smaller scope of a 3D game, clearly kind of a test box, if you will, for maybe what a next gen 3D Mario will look like, which is a much broader, open, connected world than we've ever seen before, even broader than what is in Odyssey, which is already massive zones. Well, they may take that to an even further level, but it has been a significant amount of time since we've seen anything fresh from a 3D Mario gameplay perspective, and I think Nintendo's going to go all out with this one and potentially introduce an entirely brand new gameplay mechanic. Or I would also love to see them revisit some of Mario's history and have certain levels themed around just Mario 64 and just the platforming ability. Then you have certain levels themed around FLUDD coming back and actually using that from the Sunshine era. Maybe we travel to a galaxy at some point in this game and it feels like Mario Galaxy, and Cappy makes a return on certain levels with some brand new power-ups and differences to entirely new type of 3D level progression that we're not thinking about. Like, there's a ton of exciting possibilities for the next 3D Mario, and Lord knows Nintendo's had enough time to craft something special, so that is the most likely Nintendo Switch launch game in my opinion. But when you're talking about the Mario franchise and specifically how successful Mario Odyssey has been, and if Nintendo really just wants to get business savvy and focus in on how they can move the most amount of units right out of the gate, you could make a strong argument that instead of launching with that single player adventure style game like a brand new 3D Mario, it might prove to be financially more successful to launch it with the follow-up to Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, which is hands down the most successful Nintendo Switch game ever in history. That's not a pack-in title like Wii Sports, obviously. 61.97 million units have been moved of this game, and how many people have signed up for Nintendo Switch Online just to play online with their friends in a Mario Kart title. We of course also saw them expand, literally double the courses that they had to offer in this game, taking it from 48 to 96 tracks with the booster course expansion pack waves, and those have wrapped up as of the end of 2023. So when you stop and think that Mario Kart 8 was originally a Wii U game released in 2014, and you realize that's been over 10 years, it's quite incredible on how much time Nintendo has had on their hands to really create something new in the Mario Kart franchise. And obviously, while we don't know what they've been working on behind the scenes at this point in time, I believe it will be the largest budget we've potentially ever seen seen in terms of a Nintendo game first party. Visually, it's going to probably look incredible. I'm sure they will spare no expense on the aesthetic and attention to detail in all the environments. And I also believe we see Nintendo potentially go all out in different types of online gameplay modes and leaderboards. I think they really make this a competitive showcase on the reason why you want to be a Nintendo Switch Online member day one for the next Nintendo Switch console. And I could also see a world where this is maybe not the launch game for Nintendo Switch 2, but rather that extra boost that pushes it over the edge for the holiday season, assuming that we get this console launching in March, like a lot of the internal reports have suggested. March 2025, the thing launches, you drip feed some games throughout the year, and you have a banger holiday lineup. Maybe the new Mario Kart, whether it be called 9 or 10. I think they're going to go with 10. I think they consider Mario Kart Tour to be number 9 personally, but this is going to be a big deal when it launches, and I think it might be that big holiday season game for Nintendo Switch 2. But just due to that 61 million number we're looking at with Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, I could see a world where Nintendo also just puts their best foot forward with their most successful franchise now, which is Mario Kart, and tries to launch the next gen console with that, knowing the kind of install base they have out there today for Mario Kart 8 Deluxe and the amount of users that would maybe go buy that day one. And that is a very viable strategy for Nintendo to launch their next gen hardware with as well. Now from there, I want to briefly mention a Nintendo Switch game that I do believe will have a cross-gen release, and we know to expect this game out in 2025. It's the only game that we may have seen so far that will have a Nintendo Switch 2 version separate from its Nintendo Switch original version, and we are of course talking about Metroid Prime 4. I do believe that this will be in the launch window of the Nintendo Switch 2. It's obviously going to be in the launch year with it launching in 2025, but I do think that this could be another one that's kind of not the reason that a ton of fans go out and buy the new console, because Metroid is a more niche franchise, love it or hate it. I absolutely am a huge Metroid fan, die hard, have been my whole life, always will be, but I am very aware of the sales numbers that this franchise has driven up to this point, and they haven't been incredible. And while Prime 4 can move the needle a lot in the right direction for the Metroid franchise, I also don't necessarily think this is going to be the big Breath of the Wild moment where it just triples, quadruples in sales numbers that it's never seen before. I think it'll be a more gradual progression for Metroid and the expansion of the franchise in terms of sales numbers over the course of time, and Prime 4 will do it a lot of good to get it pushed into that general direction, but I'm not expecting a 20 million plus unit seller when it's all said and done with Prime 4, and I think Nintendo really wants to pad out their launch lineup with the best possible games, but this is maybe the perfect additional game alongside of your 3D Mario or alongside of your new Mario Kart to potentially pick up when you are building out your personal collection of new Switch 2 games when you buy the console. And I do think this will be out sometime around the launch of the next gen Nintendo Switch. Now lastly, a game that I do think could do a lot right in terms of pleasing all the different types of Nintendo fans out there and really giving a big push and a big reason for a lot of people to upgrade to Nintendo's next gen platform would be something like a visually incredible version and a brand new remastered remake edition of Zelda Ocarina of Time. And while I'm not the most confident in this title showing up right at the launch of Nintendo Switch 2, I do believe at some point we may likely see it released during the life cycle of the console. I think that this would be a very good fit for a early launch game in the Nintendo Switch 2's lineup, because there are a ton of Zelda fans that want to see Ocarina of Time remade from the ground up in HD with brand new visuals, maybe even tweak some of the world and the story with keeping all of the original charm and all of the big points you want to see, but add some more depth into things, do voice acting, legitimately go all out and rebuild one of the staple games that ushered in the 3D era of gaming into the mainstream and give it that treatment that it deserves. I do definitely think that we see this happen at some point from Nintendo. The question is when, but if they want to get a lot of Zelda fans on board that are not necessarily the biggest Mario fans out there, because clearly new 3D Mario and new Mario Kart will get a ton of the general audience, but the Zelda fans might need a reason to upgrade as well, and that is a large chunk of the Nintendo fan community now, with games like Breath of the Wild doing 31.85 million, and Tears of the Kingdom now being over 20 million. You have a large fan base there, and giving them a modern day version of Ocarina of Time might get all of these brand new players that have ushered in during the Breath of the Wild era to check out one of the staple classics that made a whole generation of Zelda fans. And while we don't have this game leaked or rumored necessarily, there are some subtle hints from Mr. Aonuma that maybe something's going on with Ocarina of Time behind the scenes, and we may deep dive that in a separate video in the future. But I like my chances of seeing Ocarina of Time remake at some point on Nintendo's next gen platform. The question is on if they do it around the launch window or not. But that's where I really want to hear from you guys at this point in the video. What would be your perfect launch lineup from a software perspective for Nintendo's next gen hardware? Are you thinking that something like 3D Mario and a new Mario Kart are definitely a shoe-in? Which one do you think launches the console day one, and which one do you think will potentially be the big holiday game? And what do you think the chances are of seeing a Metroid Prime 4 version cross-gen? And is there any hope for Ocarina of Time remake in the first year of the next gen Nintendo Switch, or is that something that's potentially saved further off into the Nintendo Switch 2's life cycle, or maybe we don't see it at all in that generation? So make sure you share all your thoughts and feelings in the comments down below before you leave, regardless if we agree or disagree. Also make sure you like, subscribe, turn on your notification bell, and with that, I've been Sunbro, you've been Nation. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.